So my name is Peter Doris. My wife and I own Dorisdale Farms, which is near Peterborough, Ontario. It's a modest operation, I guess we would say. We have some beef cattle, some Simmental cattle that that we have raised here for a number of years, and we also have a direct farm market. We sell things like sweet corn, garlic, beans, pumpkins, along with a direct sale of beef from our animals as well. This is the family farm that I grew up on, so I'm the third generation Doris on this farm, and so I did go away to school to Guelph to study. I did work in Guelph for a number of years after graduation, but I did have the desire to return home to the farm and to have a go at it, as they say. And so my wife was supportive, and so in late 1999 we bought the farm from my father, and I've been farming ever since. And it's been a very rewarding experience for us by and large. So I guess a couple of things that challenge us are the speed and access to capital and things like that. So farming, the acceleration of change is ever increasing, and especially now. And so what was a large farm a few years ago of say a few hundred acres or things like that is now a medium farm, and I guess you'd say heading towards a small farm if they don't go. And so that does create some challenges, because if you're not in that category of the large farms, you don't get the advantages of the economies of scale that they do. So the response to that challenge for someone like us is to look at other avenues, things like direct market and things like that to the consumer. So in other words, trying to capture more value as opposed to being just the lowest cost producer. I guess some of the other things that we see that are challenges are with climate change and things like that. Weather patterns are not as predictable as they once were. So for example, in 2016, we had a wickedly dry summer here, probably the driest that certainly I've ever seen in my 55 years. And yields were down about half of what they should have been, which would probably have been the worst year, not only kind of in the 20 years that I've been farming, but also in the 30 years that I remembered when my father was the active manager there. So climate change is changing us, and it also is challenging us with respect to some of the diseases and pests we're dealing with, both on the livestock side and on the crop side as well. And then I guess the other thing I would say in Southern Ontario, in particular, is that we have a lot more neighbors now than we used to. And generally speaking, that's a good thing. It's certainly good for us with the market, but it also means that we have more people looking at our operations, kind of wondering what we're doing, things like that. And so Ontario right now is I think about 14.5 million people, and the latest projections I saw is that by the middle of this century, we'll probably be around 20 million people. And most of those additional 5 million people will likely live in in Southern Ontario. And so it will mean that agriculture in this area, which is a very, very productive agricultural area, but it's also going to have a lot of competing land uses there as well. Innovation ideas and inspirations come from a variety of sources. So certainly places like the University of Guelph, like OMAFRA, are places for that. And a couple of examples there, particularly with the University of Guelph, would be in our farm we use the pre-spawn's vaccine, which was developed by some people at Ontario Veterinary College 20 or 30 years ago. Things like, for example, 2 or 3 years ago, there was an issue with corn. There was a toxin called DAWN, known by the acronym of DAWN. And quickly it was figured out that at certain levels you could feed it safely to cattle, maybe not so much to pigs or chickens or things like that. And so that's certainly one of the sources we get for innovation and good information. We also get it, though, from people like veterinarians, feed suppliers, industry, and other farmers, and things like the Trade magazine. And so it's always a good idea to kind of keep your eyes and ears open to new information. And increasingly, some of the information comes in places that we might not ordinarily find. Things like our cell phone for now, the information that we have at our fingertips, the ability to look up something that we see in the field or something we see on an animal in a pasture. That's truly amazing that we can actually access information kind of at our fingertips on the go. Biggest impact on a day-to-day would be, and it started with my father. So we had a commercial herd kind of in the late 60s and 70s, commercial beef herd. And he started to upgrade that herd to a Simmental herd in the early 70s, and over a series of generations, then eventually you get to what's called purebred animals and things like that. And my father was a big advocate for performance testing, for looking at the animals, how they perform, how the animals, which ones calved the easiest, which ones had the higher growth rates, which ones produced year in, year out, things like that. And that has been very, very important for us to follow up as well. Also, things like the advantages of soil testing and kind of understanding, kind of putting all the parameters together, whether it's in the livestock realm or in the crop realm, understanding all the parameters that can affect your performance, whether it's in the crop or in the animal, and trying to basically manage those to optimize the performance and things like that. And so for cattle, for example, you not only have to have the genetics there, but you have to have the feed, you have to have the right environment, you have to have them kind of broken into different management groups that they can kind of, how would you say, they can perform to their optimum without being beat up by the bigger animal, if you will. And in the cropping realm, that's things like having adequate drainage, making sure you're on top of crop pests, so you're diagnosing issues, having a good crop rotation, looking at your manure as a resource, spreading it on the fields where you need the nutrients, things like that. I would encourage research to look at what I would call an integrated approach. And so with science, we are fairly good at isolating a single variable and looking at the effect of that variable, and that's very important from a scientific discovery. But we quite often need to take it to the next step and to see how when you have that variable and you understand that variable, how does it interact with all the other variables that you're dealing with, whether it's in an animal production system or in a livestock system. And so I would very much encourage research there. I guess the other thing is things like biometrics in livestock, I think is a really important field. So in other words, my kids have the Fitbit that they can wear. And so I understand that there are some applications for livestock with that now. And so I think that may really unlock some interesting things about livestock and may take us to a whole new level in terms of performance and kind of customizable traits for the future. I do realize that researchers perform a number of functions, and they can be broken down into a couple of big ones, which are teaching and also performing research and things like that. And so it's good that they definitely teach and things like that. And they publish the information and published in journals and things like that, which is very important to make sure that it's properly vetted and things like that. But I would very much encourage them to go out to meetings with farmers and with industry, to talk with them, to interact with them, to better understand kind of what the concerns are of industry, and also how their research fits or hopefully will address kind of concerns in the industry. And so that ability to have a relationship with the sector and with people in the sector, I think, is very critical to the researchers as well. And so the more that they can do to kind of talk with farmers and understand farmers, and hopefully the farmers will understand them and why that research is important, because it is very important. I think that would be something that I would stress. I would say be curious. Don't be afraid to try to look at some things, even some things that seem kind of far out there that may not have much, because it may not work, but it may open the door to some other things that we hadn't thought of and things like that. And so I guess I would encourage that curiosity and things like that. And don't be discouraged because somebody says, oh, we've tried that, or I don't think that'll work. It's okay sometimes if things don't work, because sometimes we learn a lot about ourselves and about the processes by what hasn't worked, and that will lead to very substantive improvements along the line. And related to an earlier comment I made as well, I would also encourage them to kind of get out there and talk to the sector, talk to industry people, talk to the producers themselves, go to meetings and make themselves known, because I think that will create a very long-lasting relationship for them that will be beneficial for them, but also certainly make them known to the community as well.